All right, ready? Who wants to go first? I brought colored chalk today. Why aren't I using Surface? Because it died. It lasted for a semester. Yeah, it was not my favorite. It worked well. I think I got a lot of positive feedback on, I like this much better than the alternative, but I didn't enjoy it as much. So I bought the warranty. I'm getting a new one, but it died. All right, question. It was lovely. It was spring day, 2 weeks where the weather's perfect, people are nice, and corn wasn't growing yet, so it wasn't humid. It was nice. Thank you for asking. I'll go back. It's a great place. More questions? Anybody? Ready to go home? Yes. No. Whatever is on the exam, I said in lecture. Right? I mean, of course, don't interpret this if I didn't solve the problem in class, I can't put it on the exam, but it's material that I've explained in class and problems relevant to it. But for example, in asymmetric information, there's a ton of other stuff in that chapter. If I didn't talk about it, you don't have to know it. More questions, problems, stuff you don't understand. Yes? Yes, the welfare consequences. Yeah, just monopoly. Okay, I can do that. So a monopoly, and I'm gonna take your question, hijack it, and dance a little bit around it, so peripheral knowledge may be imparted, which is great. But the point here is a monopoly is a firm that is the only producer of a good with no close substitutes. Right? No close substitute could mean that the similar good is just it's not available nearby. Somebody else may be producing it far away, but it's really expensive to ship. Or you really are the only producer of a good with no close substitute. You're the only guy in town who's figured out a cure for a certain disease. So for a monopolist, big Q goes on the x-axis because the single producer is producing all the output in the market. This is different from monopolistic competition in what way? How is a straightforward monopoly different from a monopolistically competitive firm? Just yell it out. You're both right. Right? So the most concise way of putting it, it's the only producer of a good with close substitutes. Right? Not identical substitutes, but with close substitutes. So there's significant competition in the market for toothpaste, but there will only ever be one brand of Colgate, but you can get 50,000 close substitutes. Versus for diamonds, right? There's only one kind of diamond, and there are no close substitutes for it, even if you're thinking about industrial applications. For those of you interested in drilling. Okay. Fiona is here. You're coming to review sessions. This is amazing. Where's Walter? You guys are randomizing where you're sitting. Yeah. All right. So marginal revenue and demand. Right? So the monopoly is different from our perfectly competitive firm in the sense that it's the only producer. Hence, it faces the entire demand curve. Because it faces the entire demand curve, its average revenue is no longer equal to its marginal revenue, but its average revenue is different from its marginal revenue. And the marginal revenue has the same intercept on the y-axis as the demand curve, but twice the slope. So it cuts the x-axis halfway between where the demand curve cuts it and the origin. Now I'm going to draw the simplest monopoly known to man. Yeah. Let's do a simple, nice linear marginal cost curve. You could make it U-shaped if you want it. It doesn't really make a big difference. So the efficient output, right, is where price is equal to marginal cost. This is what I'm going to argue. So this is efficient. So where does price equal marginal cost? Price equals marginal cost right here. So this is Q star. This is P star. This is where we would like to force the monopolist to produce at. Charge P star dollars, produce Q star units. But what does the monopolist do? Let's go high tech. Marginal cost equals marginal revenue. The monopolist will produce QM units, right? Set quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and charge the price at that quantity that people are willing to pay. So the difference between monopoly and efficient output level is the monopolist produces too little and charges a price too high. So if you wanted to do the welfare of this, you need some pizza slices. All right? I know what the right pizza slices are because I've drawn this picture about 4,000 times by now, but you can't ever practice this stuff enough. B and E. Right? So A is the little triangle, B rectangle, D, this thing kind of looks like the great state of Texas, C triangle, E little triangle right here. So the welfare, which was what the original question asked about, simply says, well, what's consumer surplus and producer surplus at the efficient level, and what's consumer surplus and producer surplus at the monopolist's output choice, and how does that differ? Right? So for the efficient level, P star, Q star right here, consumer surplus is going to be the difference between price, the price charged, and the demand curve over the range of consumption, so it's going to be A plus B plus C. Producer surplus is going to be the distance between marginal cost and price over the range of consumption, or production here, so it's D and E. So welfare is A, B, C, D, and E. Now we look at the monopolist, right? The key to solving these problems right is you've got to figure out what the right price and quantity is. If you start, labeling pizza slices and you haven't given sufficient thought to what the right price and quantity are, you already, I would bet you 50% of the points out of the picture, right? So that's the key part. So label and put circles around what the price-quantity combination is you want to look at. So here, this is the price the monopolist charges, this is the quantity. So consumer surplus is going to be the area above price, below demand, over the range of consumption. Here it's going to be A. Producer surplus is going to be the area above marginal cost here, below the price the monopolist charges, over the range of production, so it's B and D. So welfare is A, B, D, which in academia is an acronym for all but dissertation. You finished graduate school but couldn't write a dissertation, so ABT, minus B, minus C. So consumers lose big time, right? They lose B, that big rectangle there, and C in terms of consumer surplus. Producers, they had D before, they have D now, but they're trading up, right? They're trading in B for E. So they're getting plus B, but they're giving up E in exchange. So B is essentially a transfer of consumer surplus to producers, and C and E are lost. So C and E are deadweight loss. So if you want to mark this on this amazing picture right here, the deadweight loss is this little triangle right here. And that's the welfare losses from monopoly, right? Usually in all but one picture, deadweight loss was a triangle of some sort. But I would beg you to please not just jump to the first triangle that looks like it's going to be the answer. Because I write tricky questions. It says so online, right, by former students. That's the number one thing people hate about this class, plus my lame German jokes. And that means trickiness doesn't lend itself to going to the sort of obvious triangle you've drawn, right? So walk through the steps and you'll get to the right answer if you follow the steps. All right, so did that answer your question? Excellent. Next question. Yes? Can you say that again? Gladly. So the question was, can you please show the welfare impacts for an import quota? Okay. So this is international trade. There's a whole class taught on this campus on international trade. It's a good class. I think it's Econ 181. Should check it out if you're interested in this stuff. So what we have is we have a bunch of domestic producers that produce a certain good. We also have domestic demand. And then what we have is we have a bunch of foreign producers that can produce essentially an infinite amount at a constant price, which we're going to call world price. Buried in this particular setup here is that your consumption doesn't affect global price. So this is not the US in the global oil market. This is not China in the global oil market. This is your relatively small country in the world market. So if you consume more or less, it doesn't affect whatever world price is. All right? If you change that, it gets complicated, and I promise I won't make you do that because that's just me. All right, so let's look at the equilibrium here. The question was, can you show me the welfare losses from an import quota? So relative to what? Relative to what I know to be the welfare maximizing outcome, which here is free trade. Am I an advocate for unlimited free trade? Not necessarily, right? But in the simplistic model, free trade does maximize welfare. So Q star, right, would be the equilibrium quantity here, because the supply under free trade, excuse me. The supply under free trade is we just buy from the lowest cost producer first, so that happens to be domestic producers first, and then as soon as domestic producers can't compete with foreign producers, we import, right? So the supply curve here under free trade is this kinked blue dashed line right here. The free trade equilibrium is one where demand is equal to supply. Maybe let's label supply here. So equilibrium quantity is Q star, equilibrium price under free trade is P star. Now let's impose a quota, all right? What does a quota look like? 50%? Does that seem good? So let's limit imports to a certain amount. So what is imports here? Well, up until here, QD, that's domestic production, and thereafter we import. So just to be clear on this picture, imports are simply from QD to Q star. Sorry, I'm just going to write this and I'm going to move it back down here. This is imports. So a regulator looks at this picture and says, we're importing too many foreign goods. I want to protect my domestic producers of stuff. We do this all the time, so we're going to put a quota, meaning limit the total number of imports. How much? I don't know. Good units, an eraser's worth of imports are okay. Okay, so we're going to limit imports to an eraser's worth of imports, and you may not import thereafter. Right? So there's a quota that restricts the amount of imports to below what they would be in the free market. So what does that mean for the supply curve now? Well, it still is domestic producers are going to produce until they're no longer competitive with world producers. Right? The next unit would be more expensive than what foreign producers could do. So we're going to keep on going. We're going to keep on importing. And then we hit the panic button. Oh no, we've hit a wall. We may no longer import. What are we going to do? Well, at this point, are we meeting demand? No, but we can't import. So what are we going to do? We're going to go back to domestic producers. Well, our domestic producers, is their marginal cost, whatever the marginal cost is at that quantity right here? The answer starts with an N, not with a Y in this case, right? Starts with it's a no, right? Why is that? Because they've in some sense paused, right? They've stopped producing here. So what's the marginal cost of the next unit? Is it A many dollars or B many dollars? B many dollars, right? So what happens essentially is we've paused domestic production, and then we pick it up again when you're no longer allowed to import. So what you're doing is you're basically cutting off the domestic supply curve here, and you're shifting it across, and you're just picking up after you've inserted imports somewhere in the middle, right? So the overall supply curve under a quota. How many X's can Max draw in 5 minutes? Many. This is why I love MATLAB. You hit a button and it does it for you. But the new supply curve under the quota is the one with the green X's on it. All right. So the new equilibrium now is where demand equals supply. So it's going to be right here. So let's call this QQ for Q quota. Great notation, Max. And PQ for the price under a quota. So that's the first part. That's not really that easy, but not really horribly difficult. But just to be clear what we're going to compare the P star, Q star outcome, which is the free trade outcome, to the PQ, QQ outcome, right, in welfare terms. So let's do that. Question. What do you mean by it's not going to be met? So what you're going to get here, right, is the supply curve here is kinked, right? So it flattens out here, we import, and then we go to domestic production again. So what we've got here is the new supply curve is equal to the old standard demand curve, but now at a lower overall level of consumption and at a higher price. So price rises, quantity falls, consumers consume less of whatever the good is and pay a higher price for it, but quantity supplied equals quantity demanded, so this market is in equilibrium, right? Okay, let's do the welfare of this. I always have to stare at this for about 4 seconds to make sure I don't screw this up. Okay. I need some more pizza slices. I know that already, but let me just make sure which ones. You know what? Let me show you how I would do this. If I were to sit in an exam, I don't remember the answer to this. I just walk through it every time I do it. So let's pick a couple of pizza slices that seem like they could be meaningful and see how we're going to use them, okay? So it seems to me like maybe there's something going on here, right? Another pizza slice, maybe here. And I don't know, there was that weird problem where there was maybe something here. So I'm just chopping this thing up into a bunch of pizza slices, and I may use them, I may not use them. Well, this looks ugly. Let's do one more. Okay, so A is this thing right here. B, this thing. C, that thing. D, this little thing. E, F, and then let's just be clear here. G, H, I, J. And just for fun, let's label one that we're not going to use, okay? K. It's okay to label more things than you're going to use. Fiona and Walter are looking at me like, no, because we have to grade it and then figure it out. But it's better to label more things than to label too few things, because then you start erasing and that's even worse. Okay, so let's figure out what the welfare table is here. This is real economics. This is not, economics for lightweights here. So let's look at consumer surplus, producer surplus. It's a quota. Is there going to be any tax revenue for the government? Do I have to worry about tariff revenue here? No, no. With a quota, there's no tariff revenue. It's just, we're limiting imports, so I don't need an additional column for tariff revenue. So Q star versus QQ. Q star is easy, right? Consumer surplus. It's going to have a lot of letters, but this is going to be price, P star. This is going to be the equilibrium quantity, and this is demand. So consumer surplus is going to be A, B, C, D, F, G, H, I, J. Whoa. A plus B plus C plus D plus F plus G plus H plus I plus J. That's a lot of pizza slices. Domestic producer surplus is going to be what here in this simple case? Starts with the same letter as Ernie, all right? E right here. This is the price that producers get. This is domestic producer's marginal cost or supply, and they produce QD units. So producer surplus is just going to be E. So welfare is going to be A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. Fantastic. Here comes the hard part. Now price rises, right? Consumption goes to QQ, but domestic producers produce now more than before. So we're going to have to figure out what producer surplus and consumer surplus is going to be here. I'm not quite sure what it's going to be, frankly, but let's work it out. All right, consumer surplus is always easier, so let's start with that one. Price now is PQ, right? Quantity consumed is QQ. So price, demand, range of consumption, consumer surplus is going to be A, B, and F. Okay, now let's think carefullyest about what's going on here, all right? I'm nervous. You nervous? I'm nervous. I'm actually not nervous at all. All right, let's think about what's going to happen here, all right? This is equilibrium price, it's PQ. Total quantity produced is going to be QQ. But let's use some color here to indicate where domestic producers are producing here, right? They're going to produce from here all the way to here, right? Then foreign producers are going to produce. And then, again, domestic producers produce that last little bit right here, right? So they're producing from here to here and from here to here. So when we say a range of production usually, like we do in these welfare calculations, usually these are nice, what we sometimes call convex sets, where everything's in one go, right? Here, this is unfortunately separated into two pieces, where the range of production on this graph is here and here. So over the range of production, I'm going to get domestic producer surplus. Let's do it for the first part here. What's the price they get? PQ per unit, right? What's their marginal cost or supply curve? This green dashed line. So the difference between the marginal cost of production or supply here and the price they get is this thing right here. So it's going to be C and E. But we're missing something, right? Is that the end of production? No, obviously not, Max. It's not, because you just said so. They're also producing this here, right? So they're getting producer surplus, which is the difference between the marginal cost of production, which is the supply curve here, and price, which is this white line right here, over this range of production here. So it's going to be this little triangle right here, which we called H. So welfare is going to be A, B, C, E, F, H. Okay, let's see how much consumers lose. They had A, B, and F they have after, but before they also had C, D, G, H. No, no, they did, yeah. Minus H, minus I, minus J. I think that's right. A, B, F, that leaves C, D, G, H, I, J. That's correct. What about producers? Producers had E. Now they gain C and H. So producers, essentially domestic producers, get from consumers C and H, but they're going to lose in terms of total social welfare minus D, minus G, minus I, minus J. Minus D, G, I, J. So what's deadweight loss? Let's pick a sad color that we haven't used before. How about blue? Blue's not a sad color, that's a cow color. And this part right here. Right? So they're losing D and G, and they're losing I and J as a society in terms of deadweight loss. Now, D and G right here, this is, over the range of imports, the difference between world price and the price that consumers pay. So this is the marginal cost of production for foreign producers versus what they get for it. So this is the just pure surplus or profits for foreign producers they get from selling in the domestic market. Right? So D and G is a transfer of what used to be domestic consumer surplus to foreign producers. It's not something we like unless we are foreign producers. I and J right here are simply lost consumer surplus. It disappears into thin air. Nobody captures it. Right? But in terms of deadweight loss to the society, this transfer of surplus to another country plus this consumer surplus that appears into thin air is deadweight loss to this country. So if you're a global social planner, this here is just a reallocation of surplus from one country to another. It doesn't disappear into thin air. But this IJ right here disappears into thin air. Question?